Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Did you enjoy the nice long break? We'll now begin the second half of today's conference. Firstly, we will start a plenary speech by Dr. Pierre Tapie, the founder of Paxter. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Pierre Tapie with a round of applause.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have taken your nap after lunch already. And I hope also that despite your waiting, I will meet your expectation, because I guess you have risen the expectation also, so it's a challenge for the speaker. So when Professor Lee, and thank you so much, Professor Lee, for having invited me to deliver this plenary, invited me to choose a topic. I thought a little bit, and finally I chose this broad topic, because it seemed to me, from my experience for about 12 years, going back and forth between Europe and Asia, especially in Singapore, that how was the future being designed here in Asia was really a big challenge. And in fact, in many aspects, you will see how close I will be from some of the analysis of Professor Edwin Chen this morning, because I think he has done 80% of what I was willing to cover this afternoon, but I will cover that in a different way. So let me share with you, I am the past Dean and President of ESSEC Business School, both in France and Singapore, and I was very involved also in political representation of academic area toward the French political officers as chairman of the Conférence des Grandes Écoles. After 25 years of academic leadership, I decided to create a small consulting company, which is Paxter, in order to put this experience at the service of my colleagues and helping the various stakeholders of the area to improve and to progress. And so what we are doing is mainly these 6 things, which are essentially devoted toward institution, either at the level of business school, at the level of the university, or at the level of the leadership role and deans and president coaching. This is what we are doing today. So I will mainly address three key quick questions. The first one will be some macro analysis, which are recent, that we have designed during the last year, because we were needing for our own business some macro analysis, and we discovered that they were known, in fact, rigorous enough that we could really use. I will talk after that a little bit more shortly about diversified challenges, between various countries of the Asian region. Not all the countries, because I don't know all the countries, but at least I will pinpoint a few challenges within a few countries. And last but not least, I will try to emphasize some common challenges, which seems to be as very deep ones, and which are echoing largely what Professor Edwin Chen, Professor Sin Hon Hum this morning in the session about education have emphasized. So let me talk first about the macro analysis. Between the 2000 and 2015, the landscape of education has changed massively around the world. And in early 2000, there were a lot of debate about what will be the key challenge in the next 10 years and so. But for the next 15 years, it happens that regarding, maybe I have not had a look deep enough, but I tried really to look at all the forecasts. There are very few forecasts about what will happen demographically speaking, about higher education in the world, and we try to explore that, especially in relation to economic development. So this picture is pretty well known. It was based on UNESCO provision in 2004, and the rough prevision was that there will be a doubling of the students in the world between 2000 and 2015, from 100 to 200 millions, with 70% of that coming from Asia, Asia having about tripling, being on the road of tripling the total of its students, which has not been the case, in fact, but it was a roadmap. If you take the next step, not many things are known. So in order to try to have an idea on that, we tried on the 50-plus countries which will count for the most part of young person between 20 and 24 of age in year 2030. So it's not 190 countries studied, it's just focused on the key elements, which are the 50 first ones, but it gives about 80 to 85% of the trend, if not 90. How the demographic dimension on one side, the economic development on the other side, can be related to what will be the massive higher education landscape in 2030. And when you try to do so, you arrive with a very, very funny chart, which is this one. It is the first time I dare to present that in public, but now it is safe enough to be done. And if you plot the dimension in vertical of what is a proportion of a class of age, or proxy of this proportion, if you push me in the details, I will go, the proportion of the class of age going to higher education in the y-axis, and in the x-axis, the GNP per habitant purchasing power, purchasing parity adjusted, you find a very strange thing, which is a cloud. There is no coherence. There is absolutely no coherence in that. But if you go a little deeper, you can see that on the left, it seems that there is a coherence, while on the right, it seems there is not. If you analyze that statistically, it happens that on the left, which is grossly speaking, a level of development between 2,000 and 18,000 US dollars per capita purchasing power parity adjusted, there is in fact a very strong correlation. The correlation is at the level of 0.9. The correlation coefficient is 0.9. And it's really impressive. While if you are going further at the level of the so-called high-income countries, there is no correlation. And if you go deeper in that, you can even much further demonstrate that there are absolutely no correlation, which means that there is a level of development where people, the reason why there is a large proportion of students in the country comes from something else than the level of development of countries. And it's amazingly dispersed, as you can say. So if you see these two parts of the curve, which mean on the left, roughly proportional to the state of development of the country, and on the right, depending on something else which belongs to the genes, quote-unquote, of the country, and which will be probably remain stable in the next years, we forecast from that what will be considering the real class of age of 2030, because who will be students in 2030 are boys and girls who are already born, right? So if you take this information, which is already there, and if you take this information in relation with that type of modelization, the result of that is worldwide that you will have the increase of students between now and then, for the next 15 years period, will be much, much slower compared to what it has been, about plus 30%. And this 13% will be zero in total in Americas, some decrease in the north, some increase in the south, small decrease in Europe in terms of total number, even if in proportion it's significant, vast increase in Africa in proportion, but in absolute number not so much, and vast development in Asia, not the tripling which was the previous stage, but which was supposed to be so. In fact, it has been more or less 2.5, but something around plus 50% of students in the whole Asian region. These are the most reasonable forecasts that at a macro level today we could formulate. And if you go a little deeper during all the period of time, you arrive to that. But of course, among that, there are vast diversified challenges because if there are more information in the slide, I will just comment on a few, so you will have that for returning to your home. But if you take here and you have the GDP, the per capita PPP adjusted, which is the red line. If you take, of course, India and China are in another scale because they are giants. If you take the countries up to Thailand, up to a level of economic development of Thailand, you will have a significant increase, and the increase will be even higher when the countries are today less economically developed, which means usually, additionally, that they are countries where the level of youngsters in 15 years from now will be higher because the demographic transition has not taken place yet. So in blue you have what are today the numbers of students in these countries, and in brown you have what it will be in 2015. Naturally speaking, I'm not talking about vast movements of international students, so this chart just creates a glance about what will be the opportunities for demographic mobility of students, especially for countries who are on the right, who are countries whose natural population of students will decrease during the next years, and so the university will need to do something. And of course they will be willing to do something with the vast reservoir of candidates who are on the left. It could appear as obvious, but if you look at the numbers countries by countries, for example, these are the number for the low-income countries, less than 6,000 of US dollar. You can see that it's not exhaustive, but they are the main contributors to the demography in 2013. You can see that it's more than a doubling effect at this level of development. So there are huge challenges, and the Indian challenge especially is absolutely massive, as is massive the Philippine challenge. Indonesia too. China has reached the point where there is a debate about, because this, of course, this very rough modelization does not take into account some more subtle issue, which is, for example, this one, as in India, where today in India you have a level of graduate youth unemployment, which is in average roughly 50% higher than the ratio of youth unemployment in general. So you are qualified, it happens that you have more difficulty to find a job or to accept a job that you are finding. It's also now, it has become a real issue and clearly emphasized by the public leaders in China, where the ratio of graduate youth unemployment is a double of what is the ratio of youth unemployment. So there is a debate in these countries about, is it really worthy, especially in India, to pay for, because usually they are quite expensive studies. Is it really worthy to undertake higher education, because I'm not so sure I will have the investment back. In high-income countries, so in middle-income countries, you can see phenomena which are more stabilizing, except in Thailand, while in high-income countries, the challenge is that the demographic transition is there, and there will be places highly willing to welcome students, even just for basic economic reason at home. And I think it's important to have that in mind, because there will be probably big incentive for high-income countries' university to give big discounts for foreign students to come to them because they are lacking students. The first country who faced that was Japan. I don't know if you have this number, but the number of students entering at the level of the university has decreased by 40% between 1992 and 2008. So Japan has already faced a very, very strong transition in that perspective, But in Korea, where you have 80% of university who are private university, the demographic tsunami is ahead of you. In a few years, it's likely that some of the middle class private university, if I can say middle class, or less renowned than others, like Korea University or Yonsei, will have some likelihood to have some troubles because just of the demographic challenge. I wanted just on this slide to emphasize that the issue of graduate youth unemployment is not restricted to Asian places. In the United States today, you have a higher level of graduate youth unemployment than youth unemployment in general. And in the country of the South River of Mediterranean, you have in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Egypt, you have roughly 50%, the level of graduate youth unemployment is roughly 50% higher than what is the ratio of youth unemployment. So it's an issue. And what is interesting, if you look at all these countries, and I am finishing about the diversified analysis, I would say, the diversified challenges, is that if you look at the youth unemployment linked to the higher education enrollment on the country that I have primarily focused here, you can find no correlation. And if you go a little further, because I was using the proxy of higher education enrollment, which is the only proxy that you can use comparing today to tomorrow, but if you use something which is a real higher education enrollment level, and you put that in correlation with the unemployment rate of the youth, you can see that there is zero correlation. And this chart, which disturbs a lot my ministers of higher education and my members of the parliament in France, is in fact extremely important because it means that while in most of the cases to gain an education gives you some additional value, of course we are here for that, but at a macro level, within one country, if you compare one country to another, the fact that youth will be better or worse employed does not depend on the level of higher education. It's a very, very difficult reality, but it is there. We could discuss on that later. About the diversified challenge, I have pinpointed a few from that, from all these data. I think from China and India, the issue of graduate unemployment, but also of skills relevant, which is very often mentioned, are big challenges. In Japan, the internationalization today is really at stake, and the demographic squeeze has still a little bit to operate. In Korea, graduates' job relevance has been described in the press recently as an issue. Internationalization is an issue, and demographic squeeze is an issue. In Indonesia, the massive scaling up of what has to be faced, of course, is a very big challenge. In Malaysia, I will dare to say that ethnical challenges are still on the table and are not easy because it's very respectable decision that the government has taken, but however, it raised some question. And in Iran, which is a little bit Western compared to the East Pacific, youth unemployment is one of the large sources of frustration. Now, from that, if I was reasonably rational and quantitative in this two first part of my presentation. If I take more common challenges that this relative experience of Asia has suggested to me, it seems to me that it's a very interesting moment today, and I would like to address 4 points. The first will be Asian proudness and momentum. The second will be cultural identity versus global university, and you see there the connection with Professor Edwin Chen this morning. The third is what can we observe with our 1905 born students, the students who today are 20 of age. And I will finish with polysemia of academic responsibility. About Asian proudness and momentum, among a number, I pick up these three books. One is from a Singaporean, the other are from two Indians, and the third one is from a person from Korea. At recent moments, what I want to convey is there is a normal, rational feeling of proudness here because it is a century of Asia. And the speed of growth, the speed of transformation, and all that has given a lot of room to work on, and of course it's extremely interesting. However, I think that with that proudness can be risen the issue of how people can balance the willingness to serve the local need and goals with all the proudness of the turbulent environment. So leveraging of this timely proudness is legitimate, but simultaneously to develop world citizens and to educate the critical thinking of the students toward this proudness seems to be quite important. A second point that I would like to discuss a little bit is the cultural identity of the universities in Asia versus the global university. In any part of the world, at any moment of the history, a university has always been embedded in a value system. And the best, the elite university are places where the organizational DNA is related to a particular stage of the creation, a particular moment, particular mission, and so on. So an elite university is always deeply rooted. But with that, having said so, the paradox is that global university, global said so, today are bearing a high risk of standardization and goals conversion, mainly due to rankings on one side and to the power of the US academic model on the other side. And because this model has been perceived as being so successful, the trend towards standardization is very high. But if there is a standardization, if there is a perception of that, the risk to nationalistic reaction is something that we can think about because it's often at stake as a kind of reverse moment of the pendulum. And so how Asian universities can really increase their enrootment toward their own culture, looking, of course, for universal academic outcomes and signs of quality, which will be universal signs of quality, but simultaneously looking for that, more enrooting this experience toward their own culture, seems to be, to me, to be something of high importance. If you take the Shanghai ranking, for example, I love this picture. The things Shanghai ranking is more linked with is just the amount of money you have per academic capita. So the total budget divided by the total of scholars is more or less the direct reaction, the direct relation with Shanghai ranking, which of course is not enrooted in any value system, it's just enrooted in money. From this issue of enrooting elite university within the old cultural system, I think that the challenge of diversify quality, which means diversify ways to express the quality of a university, is a big challenge. For example, in your obsession as a dean, will you cope towards rankings or ratings? It's a very different framework, as you know how much manipulation can be the game of ranking. When you will look to accreditation, what type of accreditation will you look for? Are there accreditation who are perceived as standardization? I disagree a little bit with what I heard this morning related to RCSB. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, RCSB was pretty much a standardization system. Today, it is more really a mission-driven accreditation system, and so it can cope with a lot of diversities, in fact, more than others, probably. But it has changed. It's really, it's pretty recent. Will it be professional? Would it be ISO? There are many ways to gain signs of qualities around that. In terms of diversified quality, what will be your main focus? Will it be to be focused on something? Babson College is only focused on entrepreneurship, and they are the best in the world on entrepreneurship, and this focus itself has given to them a very high level of world reputation. Will you be broad, but what does it mean? Will you be first national servant toward the national necessities and needs? Will you be a global player, but what does it mean? What are your performance appraisal system for global player? And so my message there is that as an academic leader, I have felt, at least during my last 25 years of academic leadership, I have felt that it was often difficult to resist to the pressure of standardization of academic quality, because there will be just one model. And I think it's a big loss of richness. A third point I would like to address is how we are dealing with our 20-year students today. And my main point here, you will read faster than I will speak. My main point here is that our students, either as a person, the same person can be both together, and or as a group, and in fact both of them, are very ambivalent. They are very double. They are very often balancing between frantic consumers asking for immediate comfort and increasing their various toys of recognition, watches, iPhones, and so on and so forth, and simultaneously high level of political consciousness and social generosity. The way, for example, students from Singapore of this young generation are developing a high interest for community service project, while they are fronting consumers on one side, is a very nice illustration of this ambivalence. Some of the students are completely devoted to one side, some completely to the other, and we have to educate all that group. And it's challenging. It's challenging because we want to help them to critique their natural positioning, but simultaneously we have to construct an academic design we will cope in developing everyone. And to finish, from this example of the ambivalence of the students, I will finish with the multiple sense, the polysemia of what we are trying to do within other responsible academics within the academic responsibility. The first thing is to balance what is our academic freedom and institutional autonomy toward what is our relation towards our various money players, people who brings you money, who can be the states, business support, and so on, mécène, and so on. And this balance is complicated. We have to balance within that responsibility the relevance of what we are educating our students to, and the ability to think critically. And this balance is not so easy. And we have also to build the relevant skills, but the general culture. And that type of balance that we have to build is, I think, one of our big challenges in front of us, because it's difficult. And it's especially difficult now. I am taking some risk, I have to admit. I hope I will offend no one. I am just trying to have a systemic view on these delicate issues. I think it's particularly sensitive in areas where you have for a while kind of authoritarian regime or corrupted practices. Everyone will not put the same thing under authoritarian regimes or corrupted practices, but you see the idea. It's particularly tricky in these cases because education to critical thinking for students or executive or leaders can be dangerous in such situation. education to ethical dilemma or political consciousness can be dangerous, and I have to give tribute to Korea university students who in the years 70s and 80s faced very, very difficult situation conducing even to death by the military forces. So it is serious. And last but not least, because this is more targeted towards our business school area, university, of course, and we are claiming that we are placed with a special concern for wisdom and common good. But in areas where either because of corruption practices, either because of authoritarian regimes, or both, and so on, where capitalism explosion is not linked to counterpowers of collective action, which has been historically the tradition in the 19th and early 20th century in the Western world, does education to the most powerful business tools raise special ethical questions? I think it's a real systemic ethical question that we can have as business academic in some areas of the world. And because of that, having passed through something which is a little tough, I will finish with a more, I will say, admiring argument toward the region, and which raised to me a question. Asian culture has been designed by Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, which are philosophy and religion with special concern from nature, spirituality, compassion, and political responsibility. With that enrollment, would Asian university be frantically searching for power and recognition with very, very westernized traditional standard criterions? Or with these 10 millenniums of art, wisdom, culture, will they try to invent new performance criterions which will be inspirational for the rest of the world? How the private identity or the public identity of the university or the business school has something to see with this question, because the stakeholder pressure can be different in addressing that kind of question on one side or the other. And at this crossroad, what will be your place and strategy? I like this picture from William Blake, stating the imagination of the state, it is a human existence itself, because in a few cases I think our university and your university are at this time of crossroad, and clearly it's a kind of a road, even if this is a little bit caricatural, to copy US massively endowed university fighting for Nobel Prizes, or to invent new wisdom to cope with a new dilemma. But the way you will cope with these new dilemma can be really new and can be something you will bring to the face of the world. If you take these three Korean traditional value, Chung, Hyu, Ye, how this will really be incorporated to your message, I think that's a key point. And to finish with that, this has very, very practical consequences. It will have consequences about the balance between the three main academic missions. It will have consequences of professor performance criterion and appraisal system, how you will cause a professor development, what type of research you will do, how you will be free to invent or not invent learning design, how you will deal with blended education and MOOCs, how you will deal with ranking, ethically or unethically. It's a big question for business school. What will be the dean's or president tenure length? You don't do the same thing if you are on a 2 times 5 years appointment, or if you are on a 1 time 2 years appointment. On a systemic point of view, it's obvious. But are there places to address that? And last but not least, how sustainability issue in an area of the world with such high density of population like Asia is, how will you cope with that especially as business school, how your professors will really cope with that challenge. And I was impressed about the emphasis that Edwin Chen this morning gave to 50+20 report and milestone, which I think is very important. Here is really my last words. The academic world, as you see my feeling, needs today a few new lights rising from the east. And if it is these lights are from a peaceful and calm morning, we all be very better off. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think we are too much fulfilled by all the experiences and the expertise, but we have more to go. I think this is a mingling and interaction among our audience and the presenters. We have 3 sessions, so that we'd like to invite chairman of each session. So we'd like to hear what they have talked in each session, maybe between 5 and 10 minutes. And then we'll have the Q&A and interaction section after all. Okay, so first I'd like to invite Professor Ismail, who chaired education session. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Afternoon to all. We had a very interesting discussion, I think. There were many issues that were raised based on the presentation, excellent presentation by Vice Dean Professor Ham from NUS. So I'll share some of the points. I'm not going to share everything because we covered many topics and I would not have time. One of the most interesting issues which was discussed was, as a result of the point raised by Professor Ham, is the need for future business leaders who are who can think, who are exposed to many things, not just having some limited set of skills. So over there in NUS, they have introduced, they have emphasized the need for liberal arts thinking, so that the future leaders that we produce are able to have a kind of scope of thinking which is wider. And we discussed this at great length, and what they have done in NUS, which was very interesting, was actually was already practiced in some universities in America, is the gradeless subjects or gradeless semester. So where students can take a subject without having to worry about whether they will do well or not. So that will encourage them to go out of their area and study a subject which may be of interest to them, which will help them to be exposed to other areas of life, basically. And their experience was that the students become very interested, and they actually work as hard as those students who take the subjects and go for the grade. So this is something which is a bit complicated to implement in some universities which are not prepared for it, but it's something worth thinking about in order to really expose the students to more knowledge beyond their area of business or beyond the field of business administration. And a related point which was raised by Pierre, actually, right, was the fact that when they did a survey of business graduates, the CEOs were talking about the need for future leaders to have understanding of politics, right? Political understanding, which shows that actually out there, the business CEOs want students who are not only very skilled at maybe finance and marketing, but also aware of social issues and political issues, because when they go out there, the situation is very complex, and the CEOs, once they go up their hierarchy of management, then they will deal with these issues, and they are worried about the students coming out not knowing all these things and not able to cope. So, so the challenge which we may want to think about is how to introduce these kind of issues into the curriculum, politics, social issues, etc., etc. At the same time, to make sure that the students are also equipped with the necessary knowledge and skills in the fundamental areas of business like marketing, production, etc., etc. So that this is actually a huge demand on the students and also the business school itself. So we can discuss that later on, how to really make sure that this thing happens. The other thing which discussed at length was the issue of raised by Professor Ham, was this leap from the first world, from the third world to the first world. And as a result, you have a problem of lack of ethics among many business leaders or businessmen, going for profit and not caring about society. This is related to what we discussed also just now. So how do you deal with this situation where many business leaders in Asia are not concerned about ethical issues? And I related an anecdote where I was in a group of businessmen who went to the States for a leadership program, and the professor from Stanford was giving a presentation and warning from up front. He says that actually there is no relationship between profitability and corporate social responsibility action among companies. So the business managers that were with me were saying to themselves, why are we wasting our time? We are not interested to know about anything which does not contribute to more profitability for our company. If you want to talk about some CSR and it doesn't contribute to that, it's not worth discussing. So the attitude among Asian managers to the issue of ethics is very worrying. So Professor Pierre came up with a very interesting statement, which I maybe want to discuss after this. He said, teaching business ethics doesn't make sense, he said. All right, I will repeat that statement again. In his opinion, teaching business ethics does not make sense. But he says, what makes sense is educating people about business ethics. Okay, I leave you all to ponder what he's trying to tell us. Now, related to this point about making people aware of these important issues in society, sustainability, etc., etc., our colleague from Philippines say that what we need to ensure is that the university must have a sense of mission. And this is in Thailand, Thammasat, right? And she said that there in Thammasat, they emphasize the fact that their university is the university for the people. So the emphasis on making life better for people rather than about making money or just selfish pursuit of benefit for oneself, but rather for the whole society. So this should be emphasized throughout the program, including the business program. And in Singapore, they come up with a program called the University Scholars Program, where students are required to sit and take courses which are not related to their subjects from scholars in that area. And this exposes them to many of the issues which are not related to business, but therefore make them understand what is going on in society. Now, the other thing I want to also discuss here is, this is my own personal observation, is the fact that sometimes we generalize when you say that Asia is different from Europe or America, because actually within Asia itself there is a lot of diversity. if you take Asia, in the case of Malaysia and Thailand, for example, the religion itself makes the society very different. I mean, in Malaysia, you are not, the society frowns or condemns the practice of gambling, etc. Even though it's being practiced in Malaysia now, but the society itself probably one day hope to get rid of gambling and also the usury-based banking. In fact, I was reading the news from Malaysia now today is that they are coming up with a Sharia index of the whole country, meaning how is Malaysia doing in terms of adhering to Islamic principles. Okay, so that means in the future, many un-Islamic business activities may be phased out of society if the Islamic awareness among society members becomes stronger. So this is very different from other parts of Asia like Japan or Korea, etc. So when we teach business, we have to take into consideration these different cultural practices and views within Asia itself. So it's not about Asia being different from the rest of the world. Actually, Asia itself is actually very diverse. So I think I'm sorry from my group if I did not cover everything, but this is the thing, for me, the most important issues that we discussed during our session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hear the second chairman about the research. Her name is Professor Dak Tham. So I'd like to invite her on the stage.
Hi, my name is Vichita Raktham. I'm from College of Management, Mahidol University, Bangkok, Thailand. My session, our speaker was Dean Ave Matt from ASEC Asia Pacific Singapore. From our session, our guest speaker, he started with a very challenging question about what goal is management research actually aimed at. For example, if we look at the medical research, we're going to see that they're trying to save life. Or if we look at the architecture, they're trying to build some landmark. Or engineering, they're trying to produce or test some prototype. So the question is, how about our management research? Are we trying to shape new management, or are we trying to implement new process? And from his perspective, maybe it's not too many that we actually have done that. So that's a very challenging question that we start up in our session. And after that, he lay out some framework, which he called it research theater. That in management, what kind of research theater that we are doing, which have two dimensions. The first dimension is about relevance. Relevance range from whether it's a pure science to a very business and society-like. And the other dimension is about scope and span, whether it's more like the analytical and discipline focus or multidisciplinary focus. So there are the total of 4 quadrants of this. Sorry, it's not here. It's the quadrants, this lower left, we called it safe bet, or what we call like platform theater. People who kind of doing some research that are more like pure science and trying to develop their career. Or when they move on to the top left, on that side, it's more called as street theater. That when they develop some theoretical and trying to move to the street, make the more of the society or the business-like. And on the other side, it's more like the multidisciplinary, that we call it, on top, we call it improvisation, which means high relevance and multidisciplinary. While the other side, it's pure science, but multidisciplinary. So sorry about this, because I think we got it from the Macintosh, and now it doesn't show here. Sorry about that. Okay, so in this kind of research theater, are we really doing this, and which quadrants that we are performing in which theater? And the next challenging question is about the value that we provided. The value have a different stage for the individual that help to have the recognition, have some promotion for that faculty, or the value to the institute to get more of the reputation, ranking, or some learning experience. And the last stage is about the value to the organization and society. So this is the value that whether our management research are doing it at the moment. So the discussion went on to talk about whether the theoretical research and the management in the real world, whether are there a gap? If there are, maybe there are some way that we can fix it. So the proposed thing is about maybe relevant research and teamwork. Maybe some connection, some partnership would help, or engaging the research benefit to the conversation in the corporate synergies. Or the last one is to foster the Pan-Asian research initiative. So these are something that been proposed from our guest speaker. So then we move on to our discussion that whether management research at the moment, do we have done enough to bridge the gap between the theory part and the application parts? So we have lots of very good comments and some discussion about this. Okay, so now it's here. So this one is the research theater that I mentioned earlier. So I think our participants agree that some people say that we think that there's still a gap. But some people say, I think it's not a gap, but we can do better. So the following metrics here, these 4 quadrants, could help in terms of like a good roadmap for the business school, that we can set different evaluation, maybe saying that, if you just start your career, maybe at the safe bet, maybe that's help you to accumulate your journal publication and all that, and then you can move to other quadrants, which that will link to the promotion, evaluation, KPI in your school. But that is a very, very challenging question, because some of the participants say that, and how about the management team that above the dean? The dean is more like the middle person that have to do with the faculty, and then maybe the board that above them. So that could be some challenging. But if we can use this research theater as the good start, so then we can emphasize the good publication, and also we can highlight some value to the business and the society in the bigger impact. And then there been the question raised that, is it enough for us to contribute? It's the question of whether we have contributed enough or we need to work more. Like I mentioned, some people may have the idea that we have not done enough. Some say we have done enough, but then we discuss about that. But then at the end of the day, the question is, what should we do? What should we do to help, to make it better? So the conclusion from our discussion is more like, first, data is the key. There are one participant who gave a very good suggestion that at the end of the day, data speaks for itself. Data is the fact. Maybe data from Western, from the US, from Europe may not speak for Asia-Pacific region. So maybe we need to collect the data from Asia. We need to collect the data from the source. That would help to enhance the management research and make it closer to the application. And then local academic conference that is needed and enhanced. And our participants feel that it's growing, that it's in the right direction. And at the end is the networking and the teamwork helps. So those are more like the conclusion that we have. So last word from Dean Matt before we close the session, that there will be a learning process, okay? That we could develop our research agenda between the theory part and the corporation or the CEO. But we need to make sure that we pay attention in terms of filling the gap and trying to build the bridge between theory parts and the business world. So those are the conclusion for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce Professor Peach about entrepreneurship.
For those of you who weren't there, you missed a great presentation by Professor Hui. He was the director of the Nanyang Technopreneurship Center at Nanyang Technological University. And he did us a great favor in structuring his presentation around the 3 questions. Therefore, I can summarize his presentation around the 3 questions. The first one was understanding the emergence of entrepreneurship, and his center, like a lot of other centers and initiatives, was driven by a larger concern from Singapore about what is the future of Singapore, what are we going to go in the future. Clearly, there's an emphasis on innovation. We need more entrepreneurship. So this is a typical kind of precursor, if you will, to an initiative around developing entrepreneurship in the region. And here's a quote, to meet the challenges of globalization, Singapore's next generation must be both innovative and entrepreneurial. And this brought up a very interesting debate. That debate actually happened at the end of the program, but it was still a very interesting debate around what is the role of these initiatives? What is the role of both business schools and other academic institutions? Because in this case, he does not represent a business school, he represents the Technopreneurship Center. What is our role as a business school to help achieve these challenges? And I thought his example of the technopreneurship was really excellent, and it provided a very good context to have a very interesting discussion around what is it that we do, what is it that we can do to help foster innovation and entrepreneurial spirit in a nation. And he talked a lot about the role of his center being a platform, that it is a means of creating opportunities both from an educational standpoint, from faculty, but also from an experience standpoint, for people to come together and experience and think about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial behaviors. But I think what was very interesting was this discussion around, what is the purpose? Is the purpose to produce entrepreneurs? Or is the purpose to produce an entrepreneurial mindset? Or is the purpose to create a more enlivened atmosphere for a university so that students in other areas can come and experience something which they may not have experienced before? And interesting enough, the Technopreneurship Center offers all 3, which is great. And he pointed out, and I think data is always very useful. He says, a small percentage of his students are actually entrepreneurs. So it's a very small percentage of people who are coming out of that center and actually going and being entrepreneurs. So I think the important thing that this brought up was the mindset around what are we trying to do? Are we trying to produce entrepreneurs, or are we trying to create an entrepreneurial mindset? And this is an important question if you're going to be measured by the powers that be, whether that power be a government, whether that power be an executive board, a president of a university, or a dean. How are you going to be measured? Because measuring the center based on the number of successful entrepreneurs, it produces maybe not the wrong measure, and may focus efforts in the wrong direction. And instead, measuring around both long-term societal impact, but also the impact on the entrepreneurial mindset, the ability to create an entrepreneurial experience, may be more relevant. Finally, we looked at the industry-university collaboration, and again here, a very good question to ask, because in entrepreneurship this is extremely important. Because when you're dealing with entrepreneurship within either a business school or a technological university like Nanyang Technological University, you have really 2 things you need to do well. One is you have to provide a business education You have to have faculty, good faculty who come in and understand business in the context of an entrepreneurial setting. But the key is, making entrepreneurs better entrepreneurs from a business perspective. But the second important activity is to create an experience, to give students the opportunity to experience what it is like to be entrepreneurial. What is it like to be an entrepreneur? And then let them decide, is this something that fits with you? Is this something that you want to pursue? So rather than teaching them entrepreneurship, you create opportunities where they can experience this entrepreneurship, and then they can decide for themselves whether, yes, I want to be an entrepreneur, or no, I prefer another route, but I have a much more entrepreneurial view and a much more entrepreneurial mindset in whatever direction I go, whether that's consulting or other corporations. Right. So in the end, it was a vibrant discussion. It was well structured. So thank you, Professor Hui, for that. It was very nice, and I think we all got a lot out of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I'd like to invite now at this time the chairmen on the stage so that we can share ideas with the audience. I think this is a really open discussion time. We have enough time to talk. So if you have any questions or ideas to share with us, or if you have specific questions to a specific chairman, please indicate who the answer, the question is aimed to a certain chairman. Yeah, please.
Question, or it's not a question, but I would like to make the acknowledgement that the discussion points, they were just wonderful. And in fact, the source of the discussion points is none other than one of your research fellows from KUBS. So I'd like to acknowledge him and make the life so much easier for both Michael and especially for myself as well. So I would like to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, any questions are delighted to receive. Yes, please.
I'm just wondering, when we are teaching business courses, is there an avenue, a way to teach business the way medical students learn medics? They do, the experiment on real bodies. They have hospital. They do the practical training over there, and they dissect real human life. They are, when they are studying through and doing it on real person. I'm not very sure, but just thinking, is there a way that when we teach business students, we can do similar things, right? We've been doing attachment. Practical training students are doing, but that is towards the end of the semesters, things like that. I don't know if we can find a way, or I'm not sure myself. Students come in to learn business from the first semester, first year. They're already in a company, for instance, things like that. I don't know. What's your thought on that? Thank you.
I think Professor Ismail could respond.
Okay. If I may respond, in my opinion, the field of medicine is not as complex and wide as a business, the world. The medical field, you are concentrating on the body, right? And so everything is focused on that. But in the business world, we are talking about an wide array of circumstances, for example, right? You take one. The mistake is if you think education is about, in the business world, is about working in a company, then you have a problem of the person thinking that he knows everything by just his experience from working with that particular company. I remember the famous manager from Malaysia, the late Eric Chia. He was a UMW manager, and then later on was taking care of the steel company. And he didn't go through the business education. He was working and then went up the ladder. And he was giving statements saying that management is very easy. It's about taking care of the lowest rungs of people in organization. That is what management is all about. So I was thinking, because of his limited, he thinks that business is all about what he learned from his experience managing companies. So the statements become very, for me, very simplistic. But if you go and study, and then you go study cases, for example, right? Marketing cases, different contexts, different culture, small companies, big companies, managing human resources, under what circumstances, they're all very complex. So you need to expose the students to ideas and thoughts, reflections, research findings, etc., to the students. And even a 4-year exposure is not enough, as we know. And we are talking about people saying that we need to students to be exposed to more things, including political understanding, for example, right? And then also we were discussing in our session just now about deep thinking, about making our future business leaders have exposures to philosophical issues as well. So how can you expose students to philosophical issues and social issues if they are busy working in a company? You need to expose them to, I think the traditional way we are doing now is on the right track, but maybe we need to enhance it further so that their thinking is more, not just about selfish reason, also about society at large, about sustainability, about the future of society, and learning from the experience of societies, the crisis in Europe, the crisis in America, the crisis in Korea 1997, how do we prevent it from happening again, beyond the companies, but also about society at large. And that is not easy and not the same as teaching medicine. Thank you.
Would you add on that?
If you don't
sure.
mind.
Sure.
I think it's an excellent question, and the analogy of the medical field is a very good one. We shouldn't forget that, of course, their medical training consists of a lot of theory. Right? So by the time they get to the practice, they've incorporated a tremendous amount of theory. And I think the field of medicine is a great example of the impact of the scientific method on humanity. And we should never forget that as academics. We are the keepers of that philosophy, and we should never let it go. If you think about what the scientific method does, it can never prove a theory is true, but it can show and demonstrate that things we thought were true are probably not true. And I can't think of a field that's had a greater impact than on medicine. The ability to let go of the untruths, the things that people for many years thought were true, which were not true and were actually extremely harmful. And I think the same is true in management education. I think for us as academics, it's very important that we maintain the scientific method because of the importance of letting go of those things which are demonstrated to not be true and not be useful. So I think for us it's difficult because we don't have much time. I mean, to become a doctor, you got many years of study, then you've got many years of practice, and I think it would be rather impractical for us to dream and hope that we could somehow create that kind of same environment for MBA or business education. I think it would be marvelous if we could. But to me, I think that the most important thing for us to take away from your analogy is that the scientific method is what differentiates us from the airport books. You go to the airport, I mean, they don't need more practical stuff. They get practical stuff every day. Everybody who's been a manager is going to write a book or have a ghostwriter write a book about their success. But these best practices are not learning. Learning is identifying what is no longer true. It is falsifying the theories that we've held dear to us and finally let go, and that's a hard process to do. And when our executives come in or our students come in, that's a hard process for them to go through. And it's a difficult thing for us to do, but if we don't maintain that, who else in society will? Yeah, so for me, it's a wonderful analogy. Thank you.
Yes.
Echoing on your question, I think what we have seen this morning, it was with the session from NUS professor about the pre-experienced master, gives some insight to answer your question. In France, with the old tradition of the Grande École, some of the schools went up to an integrated bachelor plus master in business administration, with a 3 years bachelor, to make things simple, to a 3 years bachelor, very theoretical, with a lot of math, history, philosophy, and so on. And after that, with a 3 years master period, which is a blended period of half the time in the company and half the time at the university, which make the students that you have in the 4th year or in the 5th year as students already experienced by a real, not an internship, but a real immersion period as a young professional within a company. And you observe, as a professor, you observe these students all around these 3 years as behaving more and more as executive education participants, because of this immersion and this real experience. And it happened that at the end of this 6 years period, because they have already 1.5 years, if not more, of professional experience, they are hired by the company, not just as freshly graduated, but as having some professional experience, which is normal because of their behavior. So I think that's the kind of blended model which is close also to the medical model, with a form of blended experience between practice and theory after a period of theory, which make you reasonably relevant, but which after that enable the students to re-question the theory because of his or her recent discovery of practice.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and hello, everyone. My name is Dean Danya. I'm from School of Management, Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand. I just would like to support what you have just said in terms of doing a blended experience and introduce them to the real world and not limit it to themselves. One of the things that I would like to add is I've read an interesting article from Harvard that actually challenged whether the Harvard case that we usually use is really useful, because it would never happen again. For example, the case of eBay, it would never happen again, no? So whenever I enter the class and the students ask me, how many cases are you going to give us? I start asking them, how many cases do you think will be useful to you? Or would you think simulation or something like that? I start using that in the class, which would be to support what you have said. And I agree with you that we might need to expand our horizon, maybe having them start working, having them start even fighting in the class. And they'll know how hard it is to handle HR. HR is not going to be any boring subject anymore for them, right? So yeah, so I just want to add on that. But I think the reflection is very useful, and I think the person who originated the question was very visionary. Thank you.
I think teaching business is a very complex thing to do, because we need to teach theories, and also we need to teach reality. If you much more focus on the reality, the school becomes a vocational training center. I don't think we would like to do it. But then if we too much focus on the theories, and we are training another professor, not the businessman. So I think we are moving and playing around in between these. I think this is a very difficult job to do right at this moment. Anybody has more comment on education or this issue? Or if you have any other issues, questions, please raise your hand. I think the education relates to exactly to the research. I think the quadrant you showed today is very impressive. People say that the research is for research and for advancement of a professor's status. But yet, without having research or theories, how could we simplify the complex phenomenon? So, but then I saw a really good grid today here. Would you like to expand a little bit more on that?
Okay. Actually, that grid is from Professor Matt that he presented in the session.
Okay.
I just borrowed his, but when I borrowed some technical problems, so it has not shown. Yeah, actually, in our session, we have a very, I would say, active discussion about this because, as you mentioned, we talk about medical school, medical area as well. That like you say, doctors they work on bodies, but when we are management, we work on people. And I think Professor Chang mentioned about people are very dynamic, and people change over time. It may work now, but it may not in the next 3-4 years. So our research needs to adapt, but if we adapt too much, how about the theory part? And then I think there is another professor that talk about, but theory is still important because when you teach the theory, you feel it inside. Sometimes when you talk about business ethics, if you just talk about that, it's very boring. But if you're actually doing research, you have real data, and you can teach to make the student feel about the ethics. That's the discussion that we have, which is very active this morning. Because in terms of research, we face the same problems. We're dealing with people, and then I think Professor Matt mentioned something about consultant. Consultants sometimes give consultation to the business, and they can tackle a very specific needs, and it's very useful to the company. How about us as the researcher? Can we do that? Can we do enough? Are there any gap that we can do better? So those are the session that we have.
Professor Matthew, would you like to add on something on that?
I think one of the key issues we started to tackle was the fact that dealing with research is a very touchy issue. It's very much about political correctness, which means if you ever say, I like the business school and business education to be research-driven, but we might explore a way to do things that might be considered by some as some relevant, it's very frequently interpreted by you oppose research to practice, you lose what makes an institution great, and then the discussions has to stop because you are no longer politically correct. I think one of the big issues is how to get to a point where honestly people say, okay, research is key, it's a given. We don't question that. Now let's question how we could make a part of the research addressing issues slightly differently than just by aiming to write a paper. Because the big problem for many business schools is a publications obsession. We don't end up producing that much research. We produce papers because faculties are appraised on the basis of the so-called quality of the publication as perceived by their peers. And sometimes by focusing on publications, we just forget about research, which is in fact enhancing knowledge, enhancing the possibility to make the decision-making process working better, enhancing the possibility to define landscape in which decisions are made in a better way. We might forget that because the obsession is on publication. And if ever we consider another media, another means to, for instance, distribute the result of a research process, then immediately the faculty, the given faculty that would explore that path, might put himself in a very uncomfortable situations, because when it goes to promotion and so on, it might not have been done what would have been considered, even if the research is extremely relevant and still extremely intellectual challenging. So the issue of how to undertake this, sort of politically correctness issue related to research in advanced and ambitious business schools is a key issue. And we did not actually get that. Last point, what we did is some of the participants suggested that we could possibly work out some sort of social network to start to work on defining a pan-Asian research agenda, something that could be done in order to have many faculty from many different schools building a body of work based on issues that are relevant to the greater Asia Pacific economy and system.
Thank you very much. We are all administrators, and also at the same time we are scholars. Out of us, I can recall two important persons who produced about 700 articles in the journal, and also who managed as a chairman of Korea, Japan, and China as a chairman of insurance company here. So let me ask Professor Chang. He is a legendary researcher. He's the guy who produced the 700 articles. So I thought that maybe this is a typo error, like a 70, but it's 700. So I think you need to say something here. And the Guy Maxia is in your next turn.
Dean Lee, thank you for your kind words. Actually, as a scholar, I think it's part of our job is to do research and to educate. My view is that as a university, basically plays two major functions. One is to create knowledge, and that is done by research. And second one is transmit knowledge. So by doing research and getting our results published in papers, fulfill the first part and then a little bit of second part. Transmitting knowledge, but the target of papers published in journals are towards the peer researchers to inform them of the future research direction for the things that they are working on in the same area. But I think the more important part is that we need to transmit the knowledge that we created through our own research effort to the wider community. So in the context of business education, I think we need to transmit the knowledge that we created from our research effort to students through our teaching, but more importantly is to transmit this knowledge to the wider community to serve the business community. So this is the part that we have not been doing that well. So I guess it's up to us, being the educators in business schools, to push forward along this direction, that we need to communicate better with the business community, to talk with the business leaders, to identify what problems that face, and then we do research to address the problems at the academic level, but at the same time, we take the step further and then generalize the things and try to summarize the academic finding into something that is understandable and have management implications for the leaders, for the business community to use. So that part we have been lacking. Unfortunately, this is the part that in all kinds of academic institutions, we don't have a commensurate system to assess the performance of academics. We stop at the publication level. I guess one thing we could do is that when we evaluate faculty performance, we just don't stop at the academic contribution. We try to incorporate their contribution and the impact of the work on the community. So if we can build in this or incorporate this into the appraisal system, into the assessment system, then that would drive and motivate the faculty members to pay more attention to address real issues. And the findings that come out from their research will have more relevance to the community. So that's my humble view.
Thank you. And at the another end, Kim Maxia was a chairman of AXA Insurance Company in Korea. He handled China, Japan, and Korea for 8 years in Korea. And so you think that the business education helped you out, or did you need the research when you are operating a business?
I'm coming from the industry. I think I'm the only bad example of this esteemed assembly, because I did only one publication, not 400 as Edwin, or 500, no? And my publication was a publication on pineapple. It's not funny, huh? It's very, very funny, up to you to decide. So it was a pineapple, the variety was Pinot Rara, which grows only in Ivory Coast, on the northeastern part of Ivory Coast. And I was specialized in the center cylinder, the upper part of the central cylinder. And then I made a discovery on a special enzyme which has been developed and which results in a medicine which is still sold on the market. So I got my PhD thanks to pineapple, in fact, so you see. And then I worked for a pharmaceutical company, and then to finish for in an insurance company. And I tell you that research is the basis of everything. I mean, you cannot imagine developing a company without researching. Even in a call center, you do research. So that's fundamental. There is no matter, no question about it. And we, in AXA, for example, we had, if I remember, it was approx 5% of the total investment was in research. Not only pharmaceutical company, but also insurance company that have call center are doing research. So that I think you cannot do business, speaking of business, without research, simply.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Related to this issue we are discussing now is, first I will tell you what some of the people mentioned in the session was about ethics. We were trying to educate people about ethics, but many professors in the business school couldn't care less about the issue of ethics. They were more focused on their own field of marketing, finance, or whatever. So the challenge was how to make everybody in the business school concerned about ethics, and we discussed about that, and there was a suggestion that ethics must be incorporated in all courses. So that was one suggestion, but not that easy because some people in certain fields just couldn't care less about that. I just want also to share with you my experience when to show the impact of this focus on research and publication in certain field and become very specialized. I invited a professor from Canada to give a speech, and he was as a visiting professor, and he gave a speech on leadership, which I thought was a very interesting topic. But unfortunately, only 5 people I think turned up out of 80 staff members. Nobody actually, and there's 5, only 2 faculty members. So in other words, people are so specialized now, they don't want to know about other fields. And I have this visiting guy, and I thought we should at least honor him by listening to him, but they couldn't care less. They just want to focus on their own field and make sure that they perform well in their research in their own narrow field. And this is a very sad situation. They are under pressure to publish, and they have limited time, and they want to optimize. So it's just about to make sure that they don't waste time. They don't waste time listening to talks which are not relevant to their field of research. Now, as a result, you have a situation where students are being fed all these different research findings, and they are now supposed to do their own integration of this knowledge which will benefit themselves and benefit society, and that's more important. How can they now think about how to contribute to society when their own professors are not concerned about society? Their own professors are concerned about their own career only, right? Now the students have got to think about how to integrate this and then think about how to contribute to society. So we also may have a problem where we have to change the value system of our members of our profession. They must not only think about going up the promotion ladder to become senior professors and then make money. They must also be thinking about how they can contribute to make the society a better place. And the challenge is how to make them feel that it is their responsibility also to think about society at large and not only about their own career. Now, that is something which we want to discuss. Thank you.
We just talked about the medical centers, and if you go to a hospital, there is internal medicine and a surgeon, and there are many departments, just like in business school, marketing, accounting, and things like that. But the patient is the symptom is complex. It's not like surgeon. So if you go to hospital, there is cancer center, or there is heart center. But heart center, you have to have a surgeon, you have to have internal medicine, everything, right? So I think this is very similar to what's happening to business school. Because we are so much specialized in each area, but then it does not teach the students what to do in real field. So maybe we can have different cut so that it's a complex problem of something. That could be another view. Maybe we can have different education model in business school too. Okay.
Can I make?
Yeah, sure.
So, at INSEAD we used to have this debate about 15, 20 years ago, research versus effective impact in teaching. We no longer debate that. It's very clear to us that we have to have excellence in both. If you look at any measures of our academic output, it's quite respectable. And our teaching effectiveness is also quite respectable. So it can be done. It's not easy. We lose half of all the junior faculty we hire. They're either not promoted or they leave because the culture is not to their liking. But it can be done. And the way we do it, and I'm not saying this is the way to go forward, but in the first years of an academic's life, we only emphasize one thing: publication in A journals. Very clear, right? But we have a culture at INSEAD, and that culture comes from economic necessity. It doesn't come from any vision of doing good for society, right? We have a culture that we have to teach well. You have to have impact. You have to be able to go into a marketing class and talk to general managers and be able to deal with all the various aspects of those things. But at the same time, you better have published some very serious articles about marketing. So for us, the debate's over. We got to do excellent in all of those things. The key is, how do you make that happen? And for us, what works is hard measures at the beginning, hard measures on faculty productivity. First 3 years, you have a review. If it's clear that you're not producing, I don't care how good your teaching is, you're going to be gone. Now, we have the luxury of affiliate faculty. That's what I am. So, if it turns out that in those 3 years you demonstrate you're an outstanding communicator, that you're an outstanding integrator of knowledge, that you can create a classroom environment with great impact, then maybe you'll stay on as an affiliate faculty. So we've created this ability to sort of attempt to do both, but it's not easy, right?
I think creating knowledge is very important for any professors, and also disseminating the knowledge is another issue. But let me finally make another comment that we can make a person real person. That's another issue, actually. Otherwise, it's like ethical issues too. Otherwise, we can educate, we can train really, expertise, but with uncurable, with the personality or something like that. I think in Asia, the teachers and professors are mostly respected by the students and society more than any other Western countries. I think that should be should have more attention on that too. For example, our business school was born in 1905. At that time, it was not business school. However, the root came from there. And then recently, a couple of weeks ago, our Professor Emeritus, who was 90 years old, and then the graduates of KUBS, their class was 1961, so they are currently 73 years old. They got together, about 20 people here in this building. They invited the 90-year-old professor. And the 73 years are old enough to become a grandfather. Already they are too old, but then they got together and had the birthday party in this building. It's really something. And they are all succeeded in their fields, like a chairman of a group, or president of a company, and things like that. Out of these 20 students, one of them was the president of Korea, the Republic of Korea. So he attended the meeting as a student. So that was, I think, a very important example that the professor and student relationship, and also, which means that the professor was not only a knowledge transmitter, he was really a mentor for them, for their life. So that's why they were here at that age. So I think this is another important issue in business school, particularly. This is also another assignment for us to think about more. And then I think this is enough for discussion to have dinner. We are well qualified to have dinner now. So thank you much for today's meetings and discussions and your contribution. I think the dinner is well prepared in this building, right? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.